Emergency meeting! I'm calling an emergency meeting! We got
Breaking news.
This software, it's called Flow Frames, is gonna make your renders 2 to 4 to even 8 times faster. How is this possible? Well, with
depth-aware video interpolation,
a method that can literally add frames to your footage, effectively increasing the frame rate. For example, here's a project I made in Blender. It's a coin spinning, but that's not too relevant. The point is, here's the render at 30 frames per second, and here's the identical render, but now at 15 frames per second. As you probably know, this would be half the render time, but here's the rub. If I was to take the 15 frames per second render and send it through Flow Frames, we now get outputted a 30 frames per second render. That, again, is at half the render time. So somehow we've halved the render time and almost kept identical results. And if somehow you're not appreciating this literally means you can render every other or every fourth frame and recover almost the original render with half or maybe even a fourth of the render time. So, you know, how do we do this? Good question. When you're done with your Blender project, in my case, I have the dumb quarter thing at 30 frames per second, you're gonna take the step count and bump it up to 2 or 4 if you want every fourth frame, and then you're just gonna render the project. When your render is complete and you've also installed Flow Frames, just open up the executable, take your render, and just drop it in. For the interpolation AI, I like to use Rife because it's the fastest, but you can experiment with these. I'm no scientist. I don't know what these AI whatever does. For the input FPS, pick a times 2 times 4 times 8 multiplier. Basically, this is going to be the same numbers, the step size that you chose in Blender, and then you're actually ready to go. You just hit interpolate, and it's going to do some AI kind of stuff. And just like that, we get our final interpolated video that has now been temporarily upscaled to 30 frames per second, and that, my friends, is how you cut render times by 2 or 4 or even 8 times. Finish the tutorial, but just want to clear something up. I know it seems like fake or science fiction that you can render literally half the frames and interpolate that data back, but that is seriously what we're dealing with, which is why it's a big deal. So get Flow Frames, it's free, and if you like it a lot, maybe pay the person who made it available for free, because that person is literally cutting your render times in half, a quarter, or even an eighth.